Are you someone who feels stuck before you even get started planning a trip? Does the word budget make you feel dread and panic? Have you been putting off that bucket list trip because it always seems out of reach? Today, we break down the essentials of planning a budget using 2 strategies that Shelly and I have used to make our bucket list trips a reality. And stick around until the end to hear about our newfound travel love and a hack to skip the nitty-gritty of budget planning.
Welcome to the Travel More podcast.
Each episode, we share custom itineraries, travel hacks, expert advice, and even stories of our past travel failures to help you level up your travel game.
I'm Shelly, a lover of plans, itineraries, and cheap flights. I'm an expert deal finder with one eye always on the budget.
And I'm Bruce, the improviser, ready to pick up where plans fail to turn letdowns into unexpected trip favorites. We're here to bust through barriers that stop you from making your travel dreams a reality.
So book that flight, buy the tickets, and say hello to your next adventure.
This is the Travel More Podcast. Welcome back to the Travel More Podcast.
Episode 9.
So before we get going today, we just want to say congrats to our giveaway winner, Greta.
Woo-hoo.
So we're so excited.
To give away that year of premium Scott's Cheap Flights, now known as Going. We had a lot of fun giving away things. It's fun to give away stuff.
Yeah, and it's so awesome to see people who signed up and were interested. And definitely be on the lookout. We are going to be doing another giveaway in the future. This time, I think we're going to be looking at some travel hacking giveaways.
Yeah, we've had a lot of interest in the travel hacking world. So hopefully this will be a good one for a lot of you guys. But we're going to be announcing all of that, and we're going to be pulling our giveaway winners from our newsletter list. So if you're not already a part of that, make sure you sign up because that's where all of our coolest stuff comes from.
Yep, and you can still sign up. Just head to our website, and all you got to do is put your email in.
Yep, that's it.
So for today's episode, we're going to be talking about creating a travel budget.
Boo, budget.
Ooh, money, budgeting, planning.
Yes,
well, that's why Shelly's here.
Yeah, that's why I wrote this one.
She plans it, I spend the money.
Yeah. So, not everyone's favorite topic, but I think one that's like obviously very important. And I actually think that a lot of people don't know how to go about this. Like they either way overestimate the amount of money that they'll need, so they never even plan it because they're like, it's totally out of reach. Or they way underestimate it, and then when they actually go to do it, they don't actually have the funds to do it. So I think that this can get just like a little out of hand. Like you just got to really know what you're looking for.
Right, and trips come in, so many different shapes and sizes that the quicker you can figure out how to create a budget for the trip, the better.
Yeah, and honestly, it makes it more attainable. I know that sounds crazy because the money part is usually the part that, it feels like the barrier, but when you know what it is and you can start working towards it, I feel like that makes it real.
Yeah, and then you can really think about your plan across the year, putting a little bit of money away every month, and it's easier to set a goal for yourself.
Absolutely. So to bring us back to this idea, there are 2 ways you can think about budget. We obviously prefer one over the other, which we'll get to in a minute, but they are destination specific and date specific.
And before we get into the nitty gritty, if you want to email us the word budget, we'll send you all our planning templates and, essentially Shelly's lesson plan on how to do this, so you don't have to take your own notes.
So that's budget it's contact@travelmorepodcast.com is our email. So if you just send that word, we'll send you a little cheat sheet.
So as Shelly was saying, today we're going to break down building a travel budget in 2 different ways: destination specific and date specific.
Yeah.
So why don't we just jump right into destination specific?
Okay, so destination specific is the idea that you have a destination, you're not going to budge on it, like you just really want to go do this thing.
You got a place you want to go.
Yeah, you really want to go do this thing, so you don't really want to compromise on the destination. And in that case, this one does take a little more planning. It can get a little...
more intense.
Yeah,
like on the front end of
more
everything.
intense. So, bear with us. I promise we'll make it a little easier. And you stick around to the end, we'll give you kind of a cheat code for this one. So we'll assume for the scenario that you have this bucket list place and some high priority items that you want to check off. So you're willing to spend kind of what it takes to get those things.
So then at that point, you just need to know what it is so you can start to put the money aside or start saving.
Mm-hmm. So in that case, this is how I would go about it. There are 2 big categories when it comes to spending. That are kind of less flexible when you come to traveling. So there's transportation and accommodations. You have to get where you're going, and then you have to have somewhere to sleep. And you can't really change those.
No, like that's, you want to know that ahead of time before you're landing in the country.
But I just mean, like, you can overspend one night and be like, that's okay, we'll share a baguette for breakfast tomorrow, and we'll make up the difference for the food. But you can't be like, oh, I overspent on my hotel, now I have no money for food.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And it's just not something you can, like, change in the moment.
But for planning purposes, like, this is, your accommodations, your transportation are the two big chunks of money when you're talking about destination.
Absolutely. So for planning purposes of flights, I would use my old pal Going. You know we love Going. So I would use a search tool at the top of your membership page and see what flight deals have come out recently. You can kind of see a history. If you've ever gone actually on the website, that it shows you all of it. So for this little scenario, we'll use Norway, since we have an upcoming trip to Norway we're excited about. So we'll use Norway as this planning. It is, spoiler alert, not cheap. So do not get, like, overwhelmed by the numbers. Remember, this is a budget for something that would be like your bucket list item that you don't mind saving a couple of years for.
Right, and I think, we have a trip to Norway coming up, so we kind of just went through this ourselves, and it's a good destination-specific place because it's generally going to cost a certain amount.
You're not going to, exactly.
You're not necessarily going to get, like, a big deal, like, drop on a flight to Oslo or something.
You may get a deal for the flight, but then you're going to spend an arm and a leg in the hotel and food.
Right.
So
like,
it's not really a destination that's a budget-friendly destination in most cases.
But it's a good way, so we could tackle this example of, well, how do you make the most of that then if you know you're going to a certain place?
Yeah. So if I went and typed in Norway at the top of the Going page, it will show me, one, how much they typically cost, like the hundreds that they're in, or thousands, depending. And then it will show me all the, like, last flight deals they've had and when they were. So it can kind of give you an idea, one, are there going to be any flight deals? Obviously, it's not a true way to see, but you can kind of see, like, oh, it seems like they drop, every summer.
You get to see the trend. So if you're flexible, and definitely if you're destination specific and you've got flexible time, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, much better.
You'll see when the off season is, right?
Absolutely.
Or when the lower prices are.
Yeah. So you have that. So it'll tell you, like, basic prices that you can kind of expect, and then any kind of deals that have come up. Now, you can also go into Google Flights, which we don't talk about a ton, Google Flights, but it is also an amazing tool. It's free, so that's helpful. And in Google Flights, you can kind of look up, this summer, for example, how much are flights to Oslo? Obviously, you can't look up past, I think, a year, so it might not be, it can't, plan the trip you're currently looking at. But again, you can kind of get the idea. When I looked it up on Scotch Cheap Flights, it said that tickets to Oslo were usually in the 900s from New York City. So from New York City to Oslo, 900s, and then I looked on Google Flights, and it said this summer, for example, it's like 815 to 1001. So about in the 900s. So Scott's Cheap Flights was pretty perfect. And then I got a little more specific with Google Flights. So if you really want to go to a deep dive, you can look how they fluctuated on Google Flights.
Right. Both options just give you a good template starting point. So you're going to probably have to spend that much money. Yeah. One other good thing about Google Flights too is if you set up an itinerary, you're going to leave out of, like, let's say New York or Chicago, you can have Google email you when there's price drops and things if you want to start tracking yourself too.
Yeah, just to see what they look like. I already actually have a couple of flights right now that I don't plan on buying for months, but I just want to see how they fluctuate. So if I do see a drop, I can buy it. Okay, so that's our idea of our airfare. For hotels, I also look at a couple of things.
So, first thing we like to do when we look at hotels is check out loyalty programs that we might have points with.
Yeah, obviously we love the travel hacking, especially for some sort of bucket list destination trip to kind of cut down on some of the other costs.
So this is definitely where, when we've talked about credit cards and kind of opening up loyalty accounts comes in super handy. And our two biggest favorites right now are Hyatt and Marriott.
Yeah. So first, I'm going to check to see if I want points to cover the hotels. If I'm going somewhere like Thailand, Hyatt is an amazing use of points. So I can be like, ooh, I'm going to start saving my points now to use in Hyatt. If I'm going to New York City, they're still a good use, but they're not going to be the best, like, per point value that I could get anywhere because New York City is New York City. So you might want to just look, see if it makes sense, and if you can start to rank up those points if you're into travel hacking. If you're not, that's okay. There's still another option. I wasn't in travel hacking forever. My number one way I look at hotels there is Booking.com.
Yeah, I think Booking.com, out of all of the kind of like hotel sourcing search engines.
OTAs.
There we go. I was like,
Online travel agency.
I think that's probably the best one to do a rough search for.
Yeah, they're my favorite. I actually am not sure exactly what draws me to Booking.com, but I really like the search engine. Now, I will say this, though. I almost never actually book on Booking.com. So I look at Booking.com just to get kind of an overview of like, okay, it looks like the hotels that I would be looking at staying at are like $150 a night. I'm going to be there a week, so it's going to cost this much. Like, I just do a quick, rough estimate. I don't necessarily pick out a hotel I'm going to stay in.
You get the range.
Yeah,
you get the idea of what you can expect for budget, medium tier, and like high end for the place you're going.
Exactly. So, and, that's the reason I like Booking.com too, is they put it all together for you.
Yes.
So you don't have to say, okay, $150 times 7 is... They just say it's going to cost this for the week,
right.
or however many days you put in. That is the nice part. Do make sure that when you look into Booking.com, you're looking in the same season that you intend to go.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. I mean,
Yeah.
for instance, Shelly and I, we just came back from London, and it was Easter week, which
was
is also
so expensive.
Right. It was honestly, I'm glad we just missed the coronation, which I can't even imagine how expensive that was. But that's a good example of if you didn't even know that was happening and you wanted to go to London in May.
Yeah, you might be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's like, okay, everything costs like luxury.
Yeah, $700 a night or something
even the motel.
crazy.
So really, you got to know what time you're going. If there's like spring breaks or students traveling,
Yeah.
prices can really double sometimes.
Yeah, so make sure that when you look at this, even if you can't look at your specific date because it's years out, definitely look at the season that you're thinking of.
So for Norway, we kind of broke down some prices. And if we were going to stay like 2 weeks in Oslo, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the price ranges we saw was about $1,700 to $2,700 for that whole stay.
Yeah, for 2 weeks. So I'm going to budget probably somewhere around $2,000 to $220 because that's getting pretty expensive for us in hotels. So I'm going to try to stay in the lower end of that, but I don't want to do $1,700 and shoot myself in the foot.
You don't want to lowball, right?
Yeah.
So at this point, we're thinking, okay, we got two big things out of the way for our template. We haven't booked anything yet, but we know that a flight to our destination-specific Norway, about $900
a piece, yeah.
A piece per person,
Yep.
and then the hotel for two is going to be maybe around $2,000. So we're just under $3,000 right now as a baseline.
Yeah. Okay, this part is both the best part and the worst part, which is food and activities. So obviously the best part of traveling is food and activities, but it is the hardest thing to try to budget in your head. Because again, you don't want to lowball it and not have enough money to do what you want to do, but you also don't need $3,000 a week to enjoy it either. So it's kind of a weird spot.
It's so specific to you.
Yeah.
Whereas that's why we break down your accommodation and transportation first.
Yeah.
Because as long as you know how many people, you can really get a range for that.
But for this one, this is when I would start doing what I think is fun, what Bruce is glad that I think is fun, which is the planning at the destination. So you're not booking anything, you're just looking, like what is available. And Norway was not necessarily a destination that I was super familiar with when we decided to take this trip. So I did a lot of research, and it's fun. It's not like, like research like you did for a paper when you were in high school. Like it's literally...
to some people it feels that way.
It could feel like that.
If it feels like that to you, call us.
Yeah, right. But, it's just like looking and being like, I wonder like what the area is like and what are the popular things to do. So for us, that would be like a boat in the fjords.
Yeah, like
right?
kayaking, for instance, or taking the boat.
Yeah.
Right? Like these kind of...
It's like adventurous kind of things. And those are things that we knew we wanted to do.
And that's the thing we're getting at is when you're looking at activities or food, you got to look at your destination and think, no, I definitely know I'm going to go to these museums. Or I definitely know I want to book some sort of,
food tour.
A food tour.
Yeah.
Or you want to go see a show. Or you want to do, like in Norway, we're doing a lot of things that are outdoors.
Yeah, but in London, we went and saw a show.
Right.
So, it just depends on like where are we going and what do we hope to get out of this place. And so that's one of the things you want to look just specifically like going to Italy, you want to take a couple wine tours. How much are wine tours? Ish. Again, you don't need to like literally be like, I'm going to book this one specific. You could, but you could also just see kind of generally speaking, what do they cost? We went to Porto, tons of cellar wine tours. They're all generally the same price though. So it's like, okay, we're going to spend $20-$30 a person doing some Porto wine tours. Cool. It's just in my budget. I don't have to book it now.
So it gives you a good baseline because you're thinking, I got my hotel, I got my flights, and
then
now,
a couple of things that I know I want to do,
Right.
so I'm going to put them in there.
So for us, it would be like, we know we were going to take a boat through the fjords. That's going to be like $250 a person.
Yeah.
And then we're definitely going to go to the Natural History Museum. That's like $30 a ticket. So now we've got $500, $600 that we know we want for activities.
Right, exactly. Okay, so then we have food. And food is honestly the hardest thing to plan because it does take a little more research. So we have...
Do we really budget food? I think I just buy whatever I want, Shelly.
That's a horrible advice.
Don't listen to her. Just buy what you want. Just eat what you want.
We have this... Well, actually, what you're talking about is what we call our buffer method. So we kind of just...
Is that trademarked?
Yeah.
It is now.
So we just kind of throw as much money as we can, as we can afford.
Well, it's
into
like I think
food
the reason
activities.
food's like last on this list is because once we know what we have to spend and everything else, like
Then we also see, okay, how much can we add to this?
how much can we eat and drink after
Yes.
we've paid for
Everything
the necessities,
else.
right?
Honestly, this ends up, I mean, if we want to be real, this ends up me just like, rounding it up to a fun number. So it's like, okay, so if we just did this Norway one.
Yeah, because we were right around, what, 3,500?
Yeah, let's say we have $1,000 in activities. Let's just round it up back up.
Sure.
Again, I love to leave a buffer because especially if I'm going to be saving for this for years, there's no reason not to. You're going to get there, you're going to see the Norwegian like sweater that's hand woven and you're going to want to buy it. Like just leave yourself a buffer. So let's say we're rounding up to 1,000. So now we're at what, 4,500?
Sure.
So I'm probably going to round that to 6,000 for food and drink.
Yeah, I think, the nice thing about that is you hate to be under, right? You hate to
be under.
You hate to come back and be like, oh, man,
Like I wish I just had, waited a little longer and had an extra 1,000 because I really wanted to do this tour that came up. I really, really wanted to bring my friend back this souvenir that we found, and I don't know when we're going to get back. Like, you just don't want to do that.
Yeah, because, when you're there, wherever you're going, you're going to experience something that you didn't plan for.
Absolutely.
And you don't
100% of the time, we have found something we did not plan for. We joke about this with my dad about our most expensive breakfast in London, which was at this tiny cafe. And it was honestly maybe our favorite memory of the entire trip. And it was an accidental champagne breakfast.
Yeah.
We just meant to get a quick breakfast, and we ended up talking to these people for like 3 hours and ordering a bottle of champagne. It was a whole thing.
You never expect... It was just supposed to be breakfast. But anyway, shout out to Sheila's Cafe near Kensington,
I'm
Paddington.
sure we'll bring that up in our London episode. But just the point
one of
is,
those
you don't
things.
want to be like, oh man, should I check my bank account? Do I have the money for the champagne? Like, just buy the champagne and hang out with David.
Or the
Sheila's.
the best your dad's birthday gift from the Doha airport.
Oh, yes, the $50 baseball hat. These kind of things. They're going to come up. Anyway, so definitely have the buffer method. Have some money that you don't mean to spend. Overestimate your costs. But for food, if you want to get an idea, because food in Porto is much different than food in Norway, the prices. So we always use TripAdvisor for this. TripAdvisor is my number one food go-to. They have a good cheap eats there. You can see moderately priced stuff. So I just honestly go there, pick a couple of places that they consider moderately priced, which they will have like a whole heading
they give you your rankings. You can pick we're gonna go Oslo, Norway. Let's do fine dining. Let's do cheap eats. And they'll give you their list.
Yeah, and so I usually pick a moderately priced or whatever. That's their medium, and then I'll click on one or two restaurants, look at their menus, and be like, oh, this is what they consider moderately priced. And in Norway, that's somewhere between $20 and $50 a person, depending on what you're getting, which it's pretty expensive. I mean, it's a little beyond Disney World prices, which for me is always the upper echelon of pricing. Yeah. So that's expensive, plus alcohol. So
then you could also look at what if we want to go to a grocery store or market, and that's definitely something in this destination we'd want to see. So what would it cost us for our groceries?
Yeah, exactly. And this one looks like 10-15% more than we'd spend in New England. That's a lot easier for us to wrap our head around because we only spent about $100, so 110, 115. It's an easier way to kind of wrap your head around what could it cost, where could we cut a little bit of cost and not cut into the experience.
All right, so I think that's destination specific.
That was just destination specific. I told you that one is a lot.
It is a lot.
And if your brain is spinning, remember we do have like my little trick at the end for how you can get all the things we just said without having to do all that, but you have to wait to the very end for that one. Let's talk about date specific. Thankfully, this one is like a third of what we just did, so
right,
this one's easy.
And you already know, if you've listened to our first episode, that date specific kind of is our way of traveling, typically to make the most out of our year budget.
Yeah. So just a reminder, and if you haven't listened to the travel talk, that's a good one to go to next. But date specific is essentially, when you can travel. So let's talk Christmas week. You can travel Christmas week. You have the time off already. You just don't know exactly where you're going to go. And that's a great place to be, because now, again, with Going, we love the company Going, you can just wait for them to tell you where you're going to go with their flight deals. Yeah.
And what a great way, because, going back to Norway, we know it's expensive. And let's say you're like, oh, no, I really want to go there. I really want to go to Paris, or I really want to go to Peru. And I have to go at this time of year. You're going to pay for it.
Right.
So I really think waiting to see those destinations that show up is the best way.
It is the best way to get a deal. Yeah. And it also kind of shows you places that may not have been on your radar.
Sure.
Porto, Portugal was not on our radar, and it's one of my favorite trips we've taken. So, you just never know what kind of things are really going to show up. So for this one, we actually start with the budget. The amount of money we want to spend for this trip. So for a Christmas trip, we may want to spend $3,000, right? That's it. We're going to spend $3,000. So in this situation, I want about $1,000 at least for activities and food, because we're going to stay for about 6 days. I want $1,000 in Paris.
And that leaves us with $2,000 for flights and a hotel. And we're talking, again, this is 2 people, right?
Yeah, we're 2 people. So I'm not going to spend more than $500 per flight. Ideally, I'm looking for under $450 a person, which I've actually found the last 2 Christmases, both times to Europe. Hotels, I'm either booking with points, or I'm looking to stay for at around $1,000 fixed nights, which is around $150 a night. So if I get my ideal to work out, I'll actually have about $1,200 for those 6 days. So $200 a day for food and activities is absolutely plenty for Bruce and I in Europe. We honestly walk around more than anything at all. And that's kind of how it turns out, is that we want to kind of break it into thirds, our budget, or at least figure out first how much we want to be able to spend on food and activities, and how much does that leave us to spend on our hotel
and how
and
to
flights.
Get there. Exactly. So I think that kind of sums up that method.
Honestly, I said, that's really easy. And you may think, well, I'm not going to get flights for $450, but you would be surprised. Like I said, both trips, first of all, both of them were under $450. Mm-hmm. We didn't pay $450 for either. Paris was $350, and Portugal was $420.
It just starts, like we talked in the beginning, definitely recommend going, Scott's Cheap Flights, or even just using Google and start looking around and seeing different destinations. There's a cool feature on Google. If you look at the map, you can actually pick an airport and start seeing a starting one. So we always think like JFK out of New York. Yeah. And you can look at the map and pull out the globe and start seeing the cost of a flight to anywhere. Yeah, and you just leave the to, where you're going to, blank to do that, by the way. Yep. But anyway, so with all of that, I will say that both of those tickets that I booked for Christmas came about April. So you do want to be kind of thinking quite a bit ahead of time if that is the path you're going to take. And the nice thing about knowing, if you're set in saying that, I know what date I want to travel, I've got this time in October, and give yourself the time ahead then. Because the more, at least 6 months out for international, if you start looking, you're really going to have a chance at getting cheaper flights. Yeah, so really quick, just to round that out. So if you're thinking well, that would be cool, but if you got a flight for Norway for, $500 a piece, you're still not going to hit that $3,000. And you're right. The accommodations are going to put us over. So how do we figure out if it actually is going to fit into our budget? We take the flight deal. Then I just do a quick booking.com search, same as before, just to see the range in that date for the hotels. So I did the same thing with Paris. I just was I wonder how much hotels in Paris were. I saw a couple that fit within our range that we needed.
And then I just went to Bruce and I said, how about Christmas in Paris?
Right. How do you feel?
Obviously, talk to your player too before you start booking things. But that was really it. I mean, really, I just saw the flights. I looked at hotels just to make sure that they were in our budget. And then I asked him about it. And just to make this clear again, you do not have to book hotels right away either.
Right. I think the flight's most important.
Yes.
So, what Shelly's describing is you've got your Scott's Cheap Flights going, tracker, sending you deals. You've been looking on Google. You see a flight drop and you're like, this looks great. But then just double check and see what the budget would be for everything else.
Yeah. Because again, if you remember our Norway just a minute ago, the hotels in Norway
they're still going to be expensive.
Yeah, so they're going to be $1,200 a week.
Right.
And now we're at $500. Now we have only $800 for a whole week. And the food's also expensive. We just couldn't do that.
So that might not be what you'd want.
Even though the flights were cheap. So
right.
You really have to check the other things. And just so you know, our flights we booked in April, like I mentioned, and the hotels we didn't book until around October. So even though I checked the hotels before I booked the flight, I didn't actually have to book the hotels till it got closer. So there you have it. That is
that's
date specific is
tried and
easy
true
peasy
methods.
Yeah.
Right?
So that trick I did mention before, this trick is touring. And I know what you're going to say because you're like, tours are lame. But actually, they have been some of the coolest vacations we've ever done. So what I mean by touring is literally going on I would do small group tours. So we've only done little, 6 group people, not like these big bus tours of 100. But you can get really cool, authentic, touring companies.
Experiences, yeah.
Yeah, and they kind of do everything. Obviously, you have to do a lot of research into which companies are good, but you don't have to do any of the budgeting because they just give you a price. And it's usually, if not completely all-inclusive, almost all-inclusive. And that way, it just cuts down on all those things we just said for the destination-specific kind of planning.
Right, and I think, years ago, I don't think Shelly and I ever gave much thought to booking travel with a tour.
Absolutely not.
Because I was like, I don't know if I want to get stuck on the bus in the line following the flag,
Well, clearly we can do it on our own.
Right.
So we were like, why would we do that? We literally do this all the time on our own.
But I've got to say, now that we've kind of expanded into trying out some different tours ourselves and seeing what's out there, there's a number of companies that we'd recommend and that we are planning to even try it ourselves.
Yeah, we have many, many, many plans for next summer. Not this one coming up, but next summer, which I'm sure we'll keep everyone abreast of.
Yes.
But yes, we are huge pro tour people, especially for those bucket list destinations because they make sure you really don't miss anything. We did the same thing in Uganda, which we'll have at least 1, if not 2 episodes on because of how amazing that trip was. And absolutely none of it could have been possible without our incredible tour guide. So
right, it's it's counter to what I used to think, which is when you take a tour, you think, they're gonna bring us through it's almost like a maze of here's the next tourist trap.
Yeah,
and we're
here's
funneling
the Eiffel Tower, and
funneling
here's
everyone through, and
yeah.
And while certainly there are companies out there that it could be like that.
Oh, absolutely.
And I wouldn't recommend that necessarily. But
for our style.
Right,
it's good
for our
people.
style. Some people that might be fine. You want to just do it, go. You might find a deal. That's fine.
Yep.
But there are a number of people out there that are offering, it's almost like traveling with a friend or someone that is a resident of the country that is going to have ins and opportunities that are not easy to find yourself.
Yeah, with our Uganda tour, we ended up in a woman's backyard making coffee with her.
Yeah.
It just
harvesting bananas.
Yeah, I'm telling you, don't sleep on the tours, especially if you really have this one destination in mind and you don't want to miss a thing with it, and you don't want to do that 30 minutes of travel planning we just told you about. So definitely look into them. And if you do have a cool tour experience, definitely again, let us know in our email, contact@travelmorepodcast.com. Or if you have questions about it, we can answer them as well as we can. We'd love to talk about it.
Let us know. Reach out to us. We'd love to hear about your budget questions, or if you've got a tour in mind, or even a destination, anything.
Yeah, we love to talk travel. So remember, you can also email us that word budget to get our spreadsheet, so you can get all of this in one convenient spot.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time.
Did you know that every time you book a Disney or Universal vacation, you're paying for a service that you may not even be using?
Really?
That's right. Travel agent costs are added to your Disney or Universal vacation, whether you use one or not.
So you're telling me that I'm paying for something even though I'm not getting the help?
You got it. So next time you want to book a theme park vacation, make your money work for you. By booking with Magic Pass Travel, you'll get our expertise and years of experience without paying any extra and while supporting a small business.
Check out our show notes to find our contact information.
Can't wait to help you plan your next adventure.